next generation of payroll cards. We're so glad that you could be with us today. Before we begin, I'd like to explain a few functions of the program that we'll be using for this webinar. First, as a webinar participant, please note that you will be muted throughout the entirety of this call. If you'd like to submit a question, please type your question into the dialog box to the right of your screen. We'll be taking audience questions at the end of the panel. However, I do encourage you to submit your questions at any point during the presentation. We'll also be recording this webinar, and CFSI will make this recording available on our website shortly after the presentation. So with that said, let's get started. For those of you who are just joining us, my name is Thea Garon, and I'd like to thank you for joining today's webinar, Designing and Delivering the Next Generation of Payroll Cards. I'll begin this webinar with a brief welcome and some opening remarks, and then I'll turn the presentation over to Brian Tate from the National Branded Prepaid Card Association, or the NBPCA, to discuss the current state of the payroll card industry. I'll then provide you with a brief overview of CFSI's recently published Compass Guide to Payroll Cards, and I'll then invite Jill Goebel from Visa and Ed Wang from MasterCard to share some insights about their company's efforts to ensure quality across the payroll card industry. And then we'll open up the discussion to all of you with a few minutes for audience Q&A. So I'd like to begin by providing you with a brief overview of CFSI. CFSI, or the Center for Financial Services Innovation, is one of the nation's leading authorities on consumer financial health. We lead a network of innovators committed to building high-quality consumer products and practices, and we work to achieve our mission to improve consumers' financial health in 4 key ways. So first, we serve as a hub for innovators by fostering dialogue and collaboration through events and networking opportunities. We conduct consumer and market research to contribute to the dialogue around high-quality financial services. We provide grant funding to nonprofits and seed funding to startups looking to bring new and innovative ideas to market. And we offer consulting services to financial institutions looking to improve their financial products and practices. And so one of the ways in which we foster innovation in the marketplace is through the Compass Principles. As many of you know, the Compass Principles are a set of principles that CFSI developed in 2012 that affirm standards of excellence in the design and delivery of high-quality financial products. And you can see the 4 Compass Principles on the screen in front of you. And as you will notice, these principles are fairly high-level and aspirational. So in order to operationalize them for various industries, CFSI has published a series of Compass Guides. And the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards, which you can see a screenshot of on this screen, CFSI released this guide in the beginning of this year, and it's the 3rd in these series of guides. So we also have guides for the prepaid card industry and for the small dollar credit industry. And as the name implies, the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards provides recommendations for the high-quality design and delivery of payroll cards specifically. So in a few minutes, I'm going to tell you a bit more about this guide and about how your business or organization can use this guide to ensure the quality of your payroll card offerings. But before I do that, I would like to invite Brian Tate, Vice President of Government Relations at the NBPCA, to set the stage for us a bit with a brief overview of the current state of the payroll card industry. So at this point, Brian, I will ask that you make sure to unmute yourself and to take it away from here.
Thea, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And again, I'm Brian Tate with NBPCA, and I'm glad to be here. Thea invited me to kind of give an overview of where things stand in regards to some legislation and regulatory initiatives that may have an impact on prepaid cards overall, but specifically on payroll cards. So without further delay, let's just get right into it. Next slide, please. A little background first. In December 2014, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, issued a proposed rule that would extend existing Regulation E or Reg E rules for payroll cards to a broad range of prepaid products. In addition, the proposal also requires issuers of payroll cards and other prepaid accounts to to do a couple of different things. First, provide consumers, employees, with both a short form and a long form disclosure before they acquire a prepaid account. Next, the issuer needs to make quarterly submissions of account agreements to the CFPB for posting on the CFPB's public website. Then post cardholder agreements on the issuer's own publicly available website, and subject prepaid accounts that carry credit features, including overdraft protection, to the existing rules governing credit cards if they impose finance charges. The comment period for this proposal closed in March, and the CFPB has collected thousands of letters and comments from those publicly, including NBPCA and others in the financial services industry and consumer groups. We have, I guess, been expecting this proposal for quite some time. We have worked thoroughly with our members and others to present feedback. And we do think the goal of the CFPB, we agree with. We want to make sure consumers are protected here. We want to make sure our cards are compliant, and we want to make sure the industry grows. However, we do have a few concerns, which we'll touch on shortly. So next slide, please. In terms of some of the concerns that we raise in our comment letter, the industry solutions are, and I'll touch on all of these, and we'll go into more detail. First, the CFPB should reconsider the proposed warning that would lead off the short form disclosure. The CFPB's warning, you do not have to accept this payroll card, and ask your employer about other ways to get your wages, are negative and will discourage employees from using a payroll card. This kind of compulsory use statement would be on top of the long form and the short form that the CFPB would require. We feel that that kind of statement would have a negative impact on the perception of the card, and maybe turn away potentially some consumers or employees from using payroll cards as an option to receive their wages. Second, the CFPB should allow issuers to provide an accurate picture of the card's fee profile in the short form disclosure, rather than mandating that issuers only list the highest possible fee. In the, according to the proposed rule, there is going to be a standard set of fees that everyone, all the issuers, would have to use when they provide disclosures. Well, the issue that arises because of that is that not every issuer charges the same fees, or not every product has the same features. And so it's not clear to us why there should be a standard. You should have to list a fee if you do not provide that service or do not charge a fee for that service. Third, the CFPB should clarify what constitutes acquisition, so that employers may continue to provide informational packets provided by the financial institution to employees that include both the relevant disclosures and a card that an employee may elect to use to receive his or her wages. In that sense, we need to define, again, how the product is provided to the consumer. We want to make sure the consumers have the right information, and the rules at this point, and again, it's just a proposed rule, would make it a little difficult, again, to provide all the information to the consumer in a timely fashion, so he or she can make a decision that's best for them on how to receive their wages. Next slide, please. Now, that is on the federal level. On the state level, there is a number of legislative bills throughout the country that will have an impact on prepaid cards, and specifically payroll. But there's one state to keep in mind as we're looking through all of these at the moment. All eyes are on New York. And the New York Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, supports a bill sponsored by Assembly Majority Leader Joseph Morrell and State Senator Patrick Gallivan to restrict employers' use of payroll cards. Now, there is a couple of bills in the New York legislature, but this one has the support of the Attorney General, and would make it very difficult for issuers to offer payroll cards as a product, and for employers to use them and distribute them to employees as an option to receive their pay. Just a couple of key points about the New York bill that it has the support of the Attorney General. First, the bill would enable employees to elect whether to be paid through a payroll card, direct deposit, or to receive a paper check. Next, it would mandate that employees receive clear and appropriate notice of payroll card program terms and conditions, including potential fees and how to avoid them. Third, prohibit employers from using payroll card programs that charge certain types of fees and require employers to use card programs with at least one network of ATMs where employees can obtain access to wages without paying a fee. Requires free and unlimited balance inquiries, free customer service with a live agent, and one free replacement payroll card per year amongst the other services. Now, the issue isn't disclosures. That's something we've always supported. It is an issue that we want to make sure that we are clear about, that we want to make sure our consumers and employees and employers have all the right information when they're discussing payroll card programs. But if you go through the bill, it's very extensive and very specific about what can and cannot be provided. And I think the concern there is that with all the regulation, that it could limit the potential for the use of payroll cards in New York, and for would limit the access to the product for employees. And the New York Attorney General's, interest in this issue goes back a couple of years, back to a New York Times article, that may not have been directly on point, but did have an impact on how payroll cards are perceived. And so we are always concerned about bills that limit access to features and products, and so we're keeping an eye on this bill. And it is something to pay attention to. How New York comes out on this bill will have an impact on all of us later down the line. Next slide, please. So what's next for payroll cards? Timing, back to the CFPB. The CFPB is expected to release its final rule on prepaid accounts by the end of the year. And that is not my comments, but their thoughts. I believe I heard Director Cordray make that comment in front of the House Financial Services Committee in March. That is their expected timeline. Doesn't mean they're going to meet it, but that is their goal, is to try to get something out by the end of the year. In the proposed rule, they asked, I believe they set in place a 9-month compliance period. We have requested an NBPCA between 18 and 24 months, just to give the industry more time to make sure that everything is in order, the cards on the market can be replaced, and to make sure that consumers have some sense of what is coming down the pike in terms of features and disclosures. States, a lot of the action will still continue to take place in states, New York and others, and how that works out will have an impact on all of us, no matter if you're in a particular state or not. Legislatures like to look to different state legislatures to see how they're treating new issues and emerging ideas, and so there is the potential, if one bill gets passed somewhere, that it can be copied or imitated somewhere else. And then perception is reality. Inaccurate media coverage and lack of understanding of the function and benefits of payroll cards is expected to persist in 2016. However, the CFSI's Compass Guide to Payroll Cards is an invaluable tool to help educate the public, media, regulators, and elected officials about the positive attributes of payroll cards, which is why we're here today. NBPCA thinks that the Compass Guide is a great idea. We have been supportive. We think it's a great thing to bring different viewpoints and aspects within the industry and outside the industry to come together to develop a guide that we think helps promote a pretty positive tool, especially for those who may not have a traditional bank account or may not want one. And this is a pretty good option to receive your wages, even if you do have an account or direct deposit. So with that, I will turn it back over to my colleague and friend, Thea Garon.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful overview, Brian. I imagine that we'll be coming back to a lot of the themes and the elements that you touched upon during the audience Q&A. So with that said, and with that context in mind, I'd like to turn our attention back to the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards. And I want to urge you to think about this guide as being fully in line with the spirit of the CFPB regulations. So even though there's a bit of uncertainty about where the industry is heading vis-a-vis these rules, about whether or how the CFPB will tweak these rules, everything in this guide will remain valid regardless of how the CFPB moves forward with these rules. So another way to think about this is that the CFPB really sets the floor for payroll cards. It mandates, what payroll card providers must offer by law. But the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards sets a higher bar for providers looking to go above and beyond the basics and to really make their payroll products high-quality financial tools. So with that said, the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards is fundamentally a tool for ensuring the quality of payroll cards. At the most basic level, the guide outlines a series of recommendations for the high-quality design and delivery of payroll cards. So CFSI led the effort to develop this guide, but the guide was developed in consultation with a wide range of advisors from across the payroll card industry. So program managers, payments networks, issuing banks, employers, etc. And you can see on the top half of this screen a selection of the companies that were consulted in this process. And I do want to say that while CFSI is grateful for the wisdom and the guidance of these advisors, I'd like to stress that the guide is a product of CFSI's only and that it does not necessarily reflect the views of these companies. The guide was also funded by the generous support of the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and additional support for the Compass Principles is provided by the Ford Foundation and the Omidyar Network. So who is the guide intended for and how can it be used? The guide is really intended for use by a wide variety of stakeholders across the payroll card industry. So program managers can use the guide to improve existing offerings or to design new ones. Issuing banks, payments networks, and processors can use the guide to determine which features and functionalities to develop and to offer to their partners. And employers and employer associations can use the guide to evaluate potential payroll programs that they want to offer to their employees and to ensure that they are providing a top-notch experience to their employees. So within the Compass Guide, guidelines are provided across 3 levels of practices. The guidelines under core practices are the basic standards for a high-quality payroll card. Stretch practices are additional best practices for providers looking to stretch beyond the basics and offer a little something more to their customers. And next generation practices are for providers that have met the minimum standards for quality, challenge themselves to stretch beyond those standards, and are considering the next step in high-quality product design. And then you can see on the screen that the guidelines are grouped into the following categories. So we touch upon things like choice, safety, affordability, etc. The stretch practices have touch upon features that are slightly more advanced and sophisticated in nature. And next generation refers to additional features such as budgeting, savings, and credit that can really make payroll cards into sophisticated, high-quality financial tools. So while we won't have time to delve into each of the guidelines listed in the guide, I did want to show you this screenshot from the guide as an example of how the guide is laid out and how it can be used. So the recommendations are grouped into different levels and different categories. Here we're looking at a guideline under the core practices. It falls within the category of choice. And you can see that underneath the guideline itself are a series of examples to really make it clear and concrete how this guideline can be implemented. And then to the right of each of the examples are icons that identify which member of the value chain holds the primary responsibility for implementing that recommendation. So again, this is just a snapshot of what the guide looks like, but if you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to download a copy of the guide at the link that's provided at the bottom of this screen, and which I'll be providing again at the end of this presentation. So without further ado, I'd now like to invite our guests from Visa and MasterCard to join the conversation. And I'm so thrilled to have Jill Goebel, Senior Director of Prepaid Products at Visa with us, as well as Ed Wang, Vice President of U.S. Corporate Prepaid Products at MasterCard. And I'll lead Jill and Ed through a series of a guided Q&A, and then I'll leave about 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this presentation to take questions from the audience. And again, even though I won't be addressing your questions in the next few minutes, I do encourage you to submit your questions as they arise on the box to the right of your screen. So turning to my guests, and I'll take this opportunity to remind Jill and Ed to unmute themselves. My first question for our guests is, how do your company's activities in the payroll card industry align with the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards? So Jill, why don't we get started with you, and I'll ask you to tell our listeners how Visa is engaged in the industry and how, again, your activities align with CFSI's definition of quality that's articulated in the Compass Guide.
Thank you, Thea. First, thank you for the opportunity to participate today. This is a very important dialogue, and I agree with Brian, it's an important undertaking, so thank you. I'd like to start with an overview of Visa's role, as sometimes that can be confusing. So kind of to start at the beginning, the Visa brand and the Visa network ensure that a payroll card is accepted ubiquitously at millions of merchants globally and provides cardholders with certain guarantees. Guarantees such as dispute rights if they didn't receive the goods and services from a merchant, and zero liability if their card is stolen and used without their consent. So the same guarantees as on a Visa debit card. In addition, Visa defines the baseline payroll product, which our program managers then build upon to compete and differentiate themselves in the marketplace. It goes without saying, but it actually is written in our membership rules that all of our card products need to adhere to all federal, state, and local laws. For payroll cards, as Brian indicated, they need to adhere to or be compliant with both banking laws as well as laws regarding the payment of wages. In addition, our product definition includes that Visa-branded payroll card programs needs to provide cardholders with free and clear access to their net wages, meaning that cardholders need to be able to treat their card as a plastic paycheck each pay period if they so choose. And finally, Visa payroll card funds must be federally insured, whether through FDIC or NCUA insurance for the benefit of the cardholder. So by adhering to this product definition, we know that the vast majority of programs are implemented in a high-quality way, but we share CFI's commitment that we as an industry need to continue to improve and innovate. So to accomplish that, all the stakeholders in the payment process, those being the program managers, the employers, and the employees, need to understand their roles and responsibilities, which is why we continue to educate payroll practitioners through our sponsorship of the APA Visa Pay Card Portal, why we worked in cooperation with NBPCA and MasterCard on the employee and employer guides to payroll cards that were published about 18 months ago, and why finally we have made this commitment to the Compass Guide.
Great. Thank you, Jill. So Ed, how about you? How is MasterCard engaged in this industry, and how do your companies align with the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards?
Sure. Thank you, Thea. And again, thank you for this opportunity. I'm happy to really talk about our engagement here. Maybe I'll start with our commitment in the financial inclusion area. From that perspective, financial inclusion is actually one of our MasterCard's corporate objectives. And our CEO recently made a pretty bold commitment during the World Bank Spring meetings. Some of you may have seen the announcement. That is to reach 500 million people previously excluded from financial services globally by 2020. So 5 years from now, that is our commitment to into the financial inclusion objective. And obviously, payroll cards, in our view, plays a very important role in this commitment, empowering the unbanked and underbanked consumers by bringing savings, securities, and convenience to them. So to that end, our effort along the payroll card area has been closely aligned with CFSI. We published MasterCard payroll card standards early last year, focusing on choice, transparent disclosure, education, and the protections for the card holders. And CFSI's Compass Guide to Prepaid that was published in 2012 that Thea mentioned earlier actually provided a great foundation for our work in building the standards which we required all our participants, issuing banks, and the program managers to adhere to in terms of choice, transparent disclosures, and also obviously easy and convenient access to their funds. And in terms of the approach, we also really align and believe in the same approach as CFSI's Compass principle, and that is we need a close partnership with all the constituents in this ecosystem to accomplish these goals. And being a network, like Joe mentioned earlier, we're in a unique spot in the value chain to be able to work with all the constituents along the journey. And we're really looking forward to it and excited about what we're going to embark upon for the payroll card in the next couple of years.
Great, thank you, Ed. Now, Jill and Ed, both of your companies made a Compass commitment. So essentially, a Compass commitment is a commitment that your company made to adopt guidelines that are listed in the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards. So I'd like to spend a few minutes discussing these Compass commitments, and I'd like you to tell our listeners about the Compass commitment you made and how you think that Compass commitment will impact the quality of payroll cards in the industry moving forward. So Ed, let's begin with you this time.
Sure, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we truly believe in the fact that transparency and education are key to a better cardholder experience and a long-term cardholder engagement. That's why we continue to work with many industry colleagues as we, not only when we establish our payroll card standards, focusing on these areas, we continue to do that, and happy to have the opportunity to work with CFSI through this Compass Guide to Payroll Card exercise. We continue to want to focus on these areas in the transparency and the education, because we truly believe the better the employee cardholders understand how to use the card and know exactly and clearly where there might be fees, the more they will use the card confidently and maximize the card benefit. So we'll continue to our efforts and the focus on these areas, but not only in terms of the network standards. We're also going to continue to focus on and to bring to the market capabilities and or technology that will help cardholders to get information or receive financial tips on how to avoid fees and to build up their savings and get rewarded for the right financial management behaviors at the right time in the right place in order to help them to maximize the cardholders' benefits.
And Jill, how about you guys?
Yeah, so Visa, our commitment is taking the form of developing an e-learning course for payroll practitioners that will focus on their role in implementing a high-quality program and providing choice, transparency, and access. So in alignment with the Compass Guide, every employee should have a choice of receiving their wages on a payroll card or by another means. All program terms and conditions should be disclosed in a timely and clear manner, and employees need to have free and clear access to their wages and their account information. So as part of this process, program managers and employers are partners, right? A high-quality program needs both the right educational materials, disclosures, and terms and conditions from the program manager, and these materials need to be presented to the employee by the employer in a timely and clear way. So the course will issue spots, so meaning highlight areas that employers need to be aware of, such as federal banking rules and state wage and hour laws. And these topics are complex, so the education will help clarify these topics, ensure that the program manager and employer partnership works well, and provide guidance on where to get more information.
Great, thank you, Jill. And let me just say that CFSI is so thrilled that both Visa and MasterCard made these commitments, and we're looking forward to working with both of these companies over the course of the next few months to really shine a spotlight and to report on some of the results from these commitments. So then my next question for our panelists is, thinking big picture, excuse me, let's actually not go there just yet. Let's still focus on what your companies have going on now. So aside from the Compass commitment that both of you guys described, what else do you have on your product roadmap that you think might have an impact or might shape the quality of cards in the payroll card industry moving forward? Either of you are welcome to take this question first.
Yeah, I can. We're continuing to looking for ways to innovate and improve the product, as are our program managers. Our goal is that the cardholder use the card as their daily transactional account and savings tool, even when their employment relationship changes. So we're looking at features that such as rewards-based education, discount programs, a savings purse, as features that we know cardholders will embrace, and again, embrace and encourage them to continue to use the card and own the card as their own, not a card through which it was provided through the employer.
And
great. Ed?
Yep. I'll jump in, and obviously we're working on many different fronts because if you look at the consumer's needs, not only a product such as payroll card to help them with the day-to-day financial transactions, they also have savings, insurance, and credit needs. So we continue to look at all these fronts to really try to position ourselves and also the whole prepaid industry to be a true financial partners to improve their lives. In terms of specific areas that we're working on or looking into, I'll just perhaps mention a few. We mentioned that payroll cards are great transactional product. However, I think we all understand that there's still quite some friction in the payment, in the personal payments experience today, in terms of sending and receiving funds from other sources or P2P payments. So MasterCard is really focusing on enhancing the experience and have already begun the enablement of P2P payments from and to all MasterCards, branded card for faster and savers and easier payments. The other areas that we think that we have talked a lot about in this industry and beyond prepaid card industry as well is the need for short-term credit. We all know that the population that we serve, many of them are forced to go into payday lending simply because of mistiming of their income and expenses and or unexpected events. So, not only savings but also having access to fairly priced credit is very important to help these folks to stay out of the debt cycles that they may get into. So how to leverage transaction data from the prepaid card or payroll card in order to help them to have access to credit and also in the meantime build up their credit history is another area that we're also looking into because this is very important for the population that we serve.
Great. Yeah, I know. It sounds like you guys have some exciting things on the horizon. So now I'd like to turn to the big picture. And, aside from what your two companies are doing in this space, thinking big picture, what else are you observing in the industry that you think will shape the state of the payroll card industry in the coming years? So Brian mentioned some of the regulatory trends that he's been observing. You're welcome to speak to that or any other kind of bigger picture trends that you're seeing in the industry.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Jill, to just offer some thoughts. I think clearly, and Brian mentioned this earlier, as prepaid become more prevalent, I think that is actually a positive, way to look at the development on the legislative front is because prepaid card is becoming more and more prevalent and prominent in the use by the consumers. Now, however, the regulatory scrutiny will continue, no doubt, will continue to increase. But this, provide great opportunity for us to really rethink and reposition our product. So that's one thing that I'll just highlight. And then I think one thing that is also very, very interesting is many of you have seen the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia study that came out last year. I believe that the title of the study actually said millennials with money, right, has become the most important segments of, or one of the very important segments of prepaid. I'm not sure if that's the label of that segment or a particular segment, but I think the message there is millennial have become really the most powerful user of prepaid. Certainly that study is more about GPR cards, but I think the same implication or very similar implication will be on payroll card as well. As we think about how to speak to our payroll card holders and how to design the features and functionality, that's a very unique segment or group of users that will be that we have already started to see. And then maybe one more thing is just to offer some thoughts in terms of perhaps the conversion of GPR and the payroll card, especially given the legislative and the regulatory landscape started to bring these two products closely together. I'll turn it to Jill.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I would like to talk about 4 trends that I'm seeing, one of which is just the power of mobile and the ability that it provides to transact anywhere at any time. And things that we, the folks participating in this call, remote deposit capture of checks, person-to-person payments, these are all things that are available on the products that we use, whether it be debit or credit cards, primarily debit cards. And these are features and functionality that are appearing also on payroll cards. So the demographic of a payroll card user, the average age, we found to be around 35 years of age, and they're very reliant and adoptive of mobile technology. That is the way that they'll transact. So that's the first major trend. The second one I'm really excited about is we're finally hearing from the cardholder themselves. I think in the past, too often the cardholder was missing from the dialogue. So we recently completed a survey of 2,300 cardholders across 4 different program managers, so 4 different offerings in the market. And we found that 86% of the cardholders prefer to be paid by a payroll card versus paper check. 87% agree that payroll cards save them time versus having to cash a check and buy money orders to pay bills. And 8 out of 10 cardholders believe that their payroll card helps them track their money better than cash. So these are all, again, I think, critical data points. So when we have a dialogue about payroll cards, that the consumer, the employee, is represented. The third trend, third and fourth actually, Brian spoke to already, and that's the CFPB's ruling. And it will have a significant impact on the industry, as not all reloadable prepaid cards are the same. So a government prepaid benefits card to disperse unemployment insurance is very different from a payroll card, which is very different from a GPR card. So a one-size-fits-all rule is not ideal. And I know Visa, the NBPCA, the APA, and our program managers have all provided that input through our responses to the CFPB. And then the fourth trend, and I can't emphasize this enough, is payroll card programs are unique because they are regulated at the state level already. And so any updates to state wage and hour laws layer on top of federal requirements. So it's critical that the right balance is struck so that this product is not overly regulated and will continue to be offered.
Great, thanks for those trends. I wanted to ask a follow-up question, and this is, I think, mostly to Ed. You know, here we're saying that payroll cards and GPR cards and government benefits cards, you know, aren't the same. They therefore shouldn't be subject to the same ruling under the CFPB. But Ed, you mentioned that GPR and payroll, that the cards were actually, the products themselves were coming, you know, a bit closer together in terms of, I believe it's in terms of features and functionality. So I was hoping that you could expand on that answer a little bit.
Sure, yeah, I'm more than happy to. I think exactly that is the case. It's really, you know, looking at it from a product features and functionality standpoint, and ultimately is the choice of the consumers/employees, right? As Jill correctly pointed it out, that the cards, the payroll card and the GPR cards, are ultimately still, especially at the state level, under different and a separate and a unique set of regulations. So I think that is going to continue for many, many years. So that doesn't change, right? What continue to, the change that we continue to observe in the marketplace is more and more GPR card holders are using their cards to receive direct deposit, which obviously include their wages. So, so I think, you know, ultimately it's going to be a choice by the consumer, which and from where they want to receive their using what prepaid card product to receive their wages. And that I think that's going to come down to again, product features and functionality, convenience, and education, and so on and so forth. That doesn't really diminish any significance at all of looking at partnering with employers and this workplace distribution channel to promote the payroll card and the prepaid card. I think that's going to continue to be the trend. It is just, it will be important to think about how the card holders or consumers think about the way that they want to manage the money.
Perfect. So I think with that, I'd like to open up the discussion to our audience, and I'd like to encourage you at this time to start submitting your questions to the box on the right. I've already gotten a few questions. I do want to ask our panelists one last question, and that'll give you guys some time to get your questions ready from the audience. And this question, my final question is, Jill and Ed, what challenges do you see in being able to serve payroll card holders in a responsible yet sustainable way moving forward? And so, we've heard that some of the big players have gotten out of the payroll card industry in the last year or two, presumably for profitability reasons. So I was hoping that you guys could just, tell us your thoughts on the challenges to making this work from your company's perspective.
Sure, I'll be more than happy to offer some thoughts. I think, again, if we look at payroll card and the workplace as a distribution for the product, again, that is a very effective distribution methodology, and I think that's really why a lot of the program managers are continue to see the very good growth from this area. Profitability, no doubt, especially as regulations continue to focus on fees, the profitability is going to be challenged. So I think more and more the view, or probably a way to look at this, is really building the long-term relationship with the card holder, whether the card holder is in the same and the current employer's same job, or moving on to a different job, different employers. The continuous and the long-term relationship is going to help the program managers and the issuers to be able to see a long-term profitability from the same card holder, even when the card holder move on from one job to another.
Yeah, I would reiterate, I think that's spot on. Again, the points that I was trying to make earlier in the sense of looking, what we're trying to do in terms of innovation is look for features and functions that are attractive to the cardholder so that they will continue to use the card even after their employment relationship ends. So when you think about some of these individuals that use the card, they might be in seasonal or hourly positions, right, which especially seasonal might last, 60, 90 days. So the attracting the cardholder to continue to use the card and see value in the card even after they leave that employer is critical to profitability.
Great. Thank you. And so on this note, I'd like to turn to one of our listeners' questions, and this is around the issue of cardholder education. And so one of our listeners is wondering, here you guys are talking about educating the customer. They're wondering what your companies have done, whether you've issued materials and guidelines directly to consumers to get this educational piece out there.
So Visa, and the same is true for any network, is that we're a little bit removed, right? So our you can't get a Visa card directly from Visa. You can't knock on our door, right? You have to go through a financial institution. So the communication is really from the program manager to the cardholder and from the employer to their employees. We do, however, as Visa, try to educate all the constituents within the value chain through the channels that are available to us. So we do, as Visa, create materials, marketing materials that our program managers can choose to use. We do work with industry, such as the NBPCA, the APA. We created a employee guide to payroll cards that was offered through Consumer Action, which is a consumer organization advocating for consumer protections. So we work as an industry to try to develop materials that we can push out to our program managers and to employers. But again, it's because the channel is the employer channel. We're not doing mass marketing. We're not doing commercials, radio commercials around payroll cards. We're using the employer channel, which we think is a very effective channel because it tends to be more of a one-on-one dialogue with the individual, and it's a trusted source of information. So we try to push our materials and our educational information through both our program managers and the employer.
And this is Ed. I would just add one more thought in addition to what Jill just shared. Very similar to where Jill says in the value chain, we don't directly issue cards, and therefore, we participated in and sponsored NBPCA's education material development for employer and employees. So, we want to try to make sure that not only in print and online, the education materials get into the hands of the card holders. Obviously, we also work with our partners. One of just perhaps offer one example, MasterCard developed a text message-based education platform called Your Money Smarter. And the idea is, starting something small like a financial tips will help you to go a long way in terms of helping you to manage your financial lives. We're testing and experimenting the effectiveness of these tools, which we actually work closely with CFSI in the development phase of this. We'll continue to expand upon the usage of this. Maybe it's in the enhancements of or improvement of the content, but also in the delivery of the message. Right? It could be more than just text messaging. We could also coupling this with the timeliness of the messaging. So these are the many different aspects that we are working on to improve the education, because we truly believe in the value of this, and we know there are many different exciting ways to try to do this and deliver the information. So so that's very much of a focus area that we're working on.
Great.
See, if I could, this is Brian. I just wanted to reiterate what Jill and Ed have just said, which is that we worked with Visa and MasterCard and a number of our members to develop materials on the payroll card side that's set for the employer and employee, and we do our best to distribute those to third parties, especially groups and trade associations in town, so that if anyone does have questions, they should feel free to ask us, but we want to make sure that we get the right information out there and get it in the right hands, and that's why we think your Compass Guide is one of those efforts and one of those ways to get the information out.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And now I'd actually like to turn the conversation back to the regulatory conversation that we were having earlier. And so, Brian, I believe this next question is for you, but Jill and Ed, feel free to weigh in. Our listener wants to know, for the New York State law, what is the reason for the for the paper check option? Our listener says, in the age of direct deposit, this seems antiquated and not necessarily consumer friendly. Brian, do you want to opine on that?
Sure. So first and foremost, I will say NBPCA is not an author of the bill, so you would have to go to the author of that piece of legislation. But I do want to say that we always, and I think all of us have reiterated here, that we support consumer choice. The consumer should have the ability to select the option that's available that best fits his or her needs. But I do think one of the positive things that payroll cards provide is that it does allow recipients to receive their wages, receive them quickly, does give them some consumer protections, provides FDIC insurance. So there are some benefits there to receiving your wages or pay on a payroll card. In terms of some of the things that we are just generally concerned about, it's not the issue, again, of disclosures or making sure that we get timely information to consumers. It's just the fact that we would like to make sure that we are working, all the stakeholders are working together on legislation. If there are questions, that they seek out the right sources for those answers that they need to address any of those concerns that they may have. And so In terms of the paper check option, I'm not sure why it's there. I can't speak to that directly, but there is hopefully an opportunity to make sure that we talk to all the key people in New York and to make sure that we get them the right information, whether it's through our leading practices for employer or employee, or connecting them with one of our members. But again, I think one of the issues we run up against a lot is just kind of since our product grows so quickly and is very popular, that there is not always a true understanding of how the functions and features of the payroll cards work. So that's our job, and we will do that, but I can't speak to that specific provision in the bill and why it was placed in the bill.
Great. So then our next question also has to do with the regulatory environment. And one of our listeners wants to know how you all see the convergence of payroll cards, GPR functionality, affecting regulation. So, whereas payroll cards may have been purely, payroll cards in the past, how will this convergence affect the regulatory environment moving forward?
Well, I can take this, and others can join in, but I think, as Jill and Ed alluded to, the popularity of our product has grown so quickly that the increased scrutiny from the legislative and regulatory ends is natural. I think they want to make sure that the right consumer protections are in place, and to be fair, the industry has been ahead of the curve on that point. But in terms of all the products coming together and how the regulators view them, I think the main issue is that we want to get across that these products, especially payroll cards, were definitely regulated before the CFPB decided to look into this issue. But I also think at the same time that that there is some more kind of looking in by regulators, they will have a better sense that the industry has taken a lot of steps to make sure that consumer protections are in place, to make sure that the access to information is there for consumers. And we are willing to work with stakeholders, whether it's the legislators or regulators, to make sure that we get the right fit that allows consumers to have the right information, and then that also allows the industry to grow. So I think there's a balance there. Our goal is to reach it. We want to work with regulators. We also want to work with third parties and groups like yours to make sure that we get it right for everyone.
Hi, and just to add to that, I think the convergence is happening more quickly on the back end. So once the card is in the consumer's hand, the functionality and the features that are available to them are, identical across a GPR product, a payroll product, and even a debit card. So I think that's where the convergence is, whereas payroll cards maybe 10 years ago, they would only be used to accept wage payments, and the consumer could not load additional funds to the card. That has changed, right? So the functionality to the consumer really has converged to being the same feature functionality set as offered on a general purpose reloadable card and a debit card. The difference, I think, is just in the acquisition channel, right? In the implications of that acquisition channel. So for a GPR card, the individual most likely purchases it, right? They might be charged a monthly fee, whereas in a payroll card, just by definition, through the employer channel, it's regulated by state wage and hour laws. It has to be offered free to the employee. There cannot be a monthly fee because that would inhibit free and clear access. So I think on the front end, convergence will be much slower, if at all, right, because of the channel. But on the back end, the good news is, this is a fully functional product, and it fits within a spectrum of financial instruments that the consumer can choose from, whether they choose to have a GPR card and get direct deposit loaded to it, whether they choose a payroll card, whether they choose a checking account with direct deposit, whether they choose a checklist checking account with direct deposit, right? It's one in a spectrum of financial tools that the consumer can choose from.
Yeah, and just to say, I would agree with that. I think, the common thread of all this is really the consumer's choice, right? So some consumer, i.e. employees, choose to get paid by payroll card to receive wages. and some consumers choose to use their own GPR cards to receive direct deposit for tax refunds or for wages. So collectively, I think this is, again, overall a very positive trend that when consumer advocacy group, regulators, or legislators look at this, when they look at this, this is not just so much about, should people be paid on a payroll card. This is more about, voluntarily many people are choosing to be paid on a prepaid card versus paper paychecks, or even, as a way to build up budget and saving tools in addition to their regular checking account, right? So the trend have started it will continue. So I agree with Brian and Jill that the conversion is really kind of, on a features and functionality standpoint. But what I think really exciting about is we are seeing that the consumer choice is driving a very positive adoption across the board.
Great. And so let me just ask one last question before we need to conclude. And Jill, I'm going to direct this question to you. In our Compass Guide to Payroll Cards and in the Prepaid Guide as well, we do list those next generation practices, the recommendations around savings, budgeting, and credit, and all of you have talked at some length about your efforts to add those features to your cards. But Jill, I'm curious, in your attempts to get customer feedback, did you hear anything specifically from them about whether they were interested in these tools?
So yeah, just real clarification, meaning the end cardholder, the employers, or the program managers being the customer? Good
question. I was thinking of the consumers.
Okay. Yeah, so as part of kind of our product roadmap, we have conducted research with cardholders and asked them kind of which features and functions do they value over others. So yes, we do ask them specifically, and that is part of our product roadmap. So we've talked a little bit about, I mentioned earlier, rewards-based learning, early access to paid wages, savings purse. So these are kind of features and functions that they do value.
Great, perfect. Well, I would like to thank all of our panelists for engaging in such a robust, interesting discussion. I'd also like to thank our audience for submitting questions. I apologize that we weren't able to get to all of them, but I do appreciate your interest in this matter. So with that, I would like to just close by making a quick plug for CFSI's annual conference called Emerge. This is Emerge 2015. And our conference brings together over 700 innovators for a series of truly insightful discussions. So this conference will be held at the Hilton in Austin, Texas, and I encourage you to register if you haven't already. This really is a fantastic event and one that you won't want to miss. So I do encourage you to go ahead and register on our website if you haven't already. And with that, I'd like to provide you with this link to download the Compass Guide to Payroll Cards if you haven't already. And once again, I'd like to thank you all for joining the webinar. I'd also like to remind you that a recording of the webinar will be posted online in the next few days. So I encourage you to share this webinar and the report with your networks and to follow up with any of us should you so desire. So with that, once again, thank you so much for joining this conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. And thank you again to our panelists.